Now, with the 2027 general elections on the horizon, Nigeria's political landscape is shifting. Opposition figures are repositioning, seeking alliances, and redefining loyalties. Peter Obi's move to the African Democratic Congress and his cooperation with leaders like Atiku Abubakar and Nasir El-Rufai shows an effort to build a coalition that can compete with the ruling party. At the same time, figures like former President Goodluck Jonathan remain aligned with the PDP, signaling efforts by older structures to stay relevant. On the other hand, the ruling APC continues to attract defectors from opposition ranks. So what does this realignment mean for party identity, ideology, and Nigeria's democratic options in 2027?
So to help us explore this, we're joined by Barrister Gozie Nwachukwu, Organizing Secretary, PDP, Imo State, 2023-24. You're welcome to Breakfast Extra. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Now, I would like us to begin by asking, and particularly one personality here. We've seen these cross carpets from APC, from PDP to APC and NPP, but there was one particularly last week that people had their eyes on, Barrister, and it was Peter Obi's move to the ADC. Now, many would say, strange bedfellows, why leave the LP and join ADC? Why not on a coalition basis, like other members of the ADC are still maintaining their party alliances while coming together for a coalition? So how do you see his move? What dynamics do you see playing out here for Peter Obi, the LP, and the ADC currently?
For having me. What has happened is that if you could take your mind back a little bit to the formation of the ADC, you could remember that Peter was part of the initial meetings and open gatherings which were held at the Yaradua Center when this ADC was, the new ADC was announced. So the movement of Peter to ADC was just a matter of time. There's nothing new about it. There's nothing new. It's only new to those who are not in the political system. For us who are political players and who are keen watchers of the political events, Labour Party was foreclosed for him because there were some interferences in Labour that made it impossible for him to continue his political interactions and ambition in Labour. So it was already, he was going to ADC or probably another platform, but Peter had been part of the ADC. And the only thing that shifts is that he has a movement called the Obedient Movement. The only dynamic that has shifted is that now the Obedient Movement will now support him in ADC. And that begins to give ADC more visibility, because ADC had been like a party that, a vehicle without wheels. I could call it a vehicle without wheels. It was just like static, it wasn't moving. But since Peter came in, you could notice a few of the obedience now with their energy, they come in. But there's a very pertinent question. And the pertinent question is, how long will these boards from the obedience last? Because the ADC, ab initio, was built specifically to serve the purposes of a particular political movement and a political leader. I fear, because if a primary, if a presidential primary takes place in ADC, Peter will never win that primary. So I don't know what he intends to do. I don't know how his obedience will take it if tomorrow it turns out that Peter is not the candidate of the ADC for president, for the presidential election in 2027. So it's a space that needs to be watched further. There are a lot of intrigues that are yet to play out.
It's very interesting that you should say that, but we will come to the conversation on who number one or number two will be when it comes to the ADC and this move. But let's take a look at this ideological adulteration when it comes to people crossing parties. If the ADC didn't have wheels until Peter Obi, you're saying that his LP movement, the Obedient, would actually shift with him to the ADC. But really, will they shift? We see a situation where politics in Nigeria has now become more personality than it is ideology. If he's moving over to the ADC or any other a governor or individual or politician for that matter, they're moving also with their own ideologies into these systems that did not want the same kind of ideology. So it's all adulterated. At the end of the day, you have such mixes that every single party these days seems to be, you know, the very next one. What about the case of the PDP? Everybody moving out of the PDP, what is left? I know you will have strong opinion on this one, but when it comes to opposition and the moves that we're seeing, the realignment, where does the PDP stand for 2027?
Well, unfortunately, the PDP, as it stands today, if things continue the way it is, the party is going to go into temporary extinction. Why I use the word temporary is because, legally speaking, the PDP cannot field candidates as of today for any elections. The law and the practice is that parties are run basically by the national executives of the party. That's what they call the National Working Committee. They see to the day-to-day running of political parties. And the law is that the National Working Committee also is in charge of the holding of party primaries where candidates emerge. As we speak, the People's Democratic Party has no legal National Working Committee anywhere on planet Earth. Because of the legal problem, partly because of the cases in court, and partly because of the misjudgment of what they were up against in 2027. The leaders didn't understand the game plan of the party in power. This is politics. In politics, they say it's like war, and in war, everything is fair. The party in power has utilized their incumbency to make sure that the PDP enters into some temporary extinction, which could become permanent if nothing is done with those cases they have everywhere in court, saying that conventions should not hold for one reason or the other. But as long as those conventions don't hold, you can't elect new officials. And as long as you don't have new officials at the national level, the party doesn't exist. Administratively, they cannot do anything. So as we speak, the PDP is not going to field any candidate except something changes. I'm sure you know.
So with 2027 just next door, are you saying that the rivalry will be between the APC and what other party if the PDP is unavailable? Who would the strong opposition be?
Yeah, today, as of today, there are only two political parties that can go into elections. One, the APC and the ADC, that can really go into national elections. The other smaller parties here and there, like ABGA, you know, Soludo uses it in Anambra, so ABGA can also go into elections, but it's quite a localized thing in Anambra there. ABGA has no influence outside Anambra. And you may see pockets of parties because of the position of the PDP. There may be breakaways. Like in Oyo State, watch out for Oyo State, watch out for Bauchi State, watch out for Zamfara State, where you have governors of the PDP who may end up in new platforms. But today, there are two parties that are looking like they can really square up in a presidential election, if that's what you really mean. It is the APC and the ADC. But the ADC as constituted today is also standing on one leg. Because there are suits in the Federal High Court challenging the legality of the transfer of leadership in ADC from the Okemos leadership to the David Mark leadership. There are allegations in court that the constitution of the ADC was not followed in transfer of those powers and positions. And the law is that parties are bound by their own rules and their constitution, which is supposed to be their own ground norm. So also, Nigerians should watch that space. There are cases in court which from APC, ADC, national executive, national officers, and some zonal officers and state officers went to court. There's also one by the 2019 presidential candidate, I think, Abubakar or so. Those cases are the Federal High Court in Abuja. If those cases go against the David Mark leadership, we have ADC will enter into administrative quagmire, just like PDP and Labour. So watch that space also. There are a lot of intrigues going on. If care is not taken the way this thing is going, the APC may be probably the only party that may be strong enough to even do a national election. That is the truth of the matter.
Wow. So, Barrister, you've mentioned so many things and you've touched on different parts. And, you know, the confusion here is the movement of different people, the defection. You know, after pledging, you know, alliance to a particular party and, you know, following their vision and mission and having to see that they're switching parties. Now, these movements, do you think they're more of a competitive, like a multi-party democracy, or it's a realignment around, you know, personal agenda rather than the idea of, you know, Nigerian democracy as a whole?
Yeah, you know, the problem is that most people want to sort of characterize politics in terms of what is written in the books written by Plato, Montesquieu, Socrates, and the rest of them. Forget all that. The ideology, the chief ideology in politics is no permanent friend, no permanent enemy. What you have is permanent interest. Forget all the ideology. After all, Peter called some of the people in ADC today, he referred to them as something of criminality, the structure of criminality in his 2023 election rounds. But today, Peter is seated with them, with the people he called criminals. He has joined them. So the question you ask is Peter now a criminal, or have they been absolved of their criminality according to him? So the issue is that there's nothing ideological. Basically ideological, maybe conservative, liberal, forget those things. The ideology on which Nigerian politics runs is no permanent friend, no permanent foe. What you have is a permanent interest. And what is their interest? To get power, to get into power, to administer power. So there's nothing ideological about it. It's self-selfish interest. It's all personal interest. And this is the bane of the opposition. The bane of the opposition, why they are not able to do the needful that is required to give APC the run they deserve, is because the leadership of the so-called opposition, I use the word so-called with caution, because what they are doing is not really opposition. What they are doing is self-centered opposition. By the time they are ready to do opposition, they should go back to the playbook of the APC pre-2015 and look at how the leadership, most of them eschewed, gave away their personal ambitions and were able to do the right thing. But today, everybody wants to be the one to run the election. Everybody wants to be the one to be here and be there. Nobody wants to look at the issues of who can really win this election. We're in opposition. Where can we get votes, like organic votes, since we're not in government? So for me, the interest is just to grab power, to get into power. There's nothing ideological, in this real sense of ideology, about Nigerian politics or all these movements you're seeing. It's all an attempt to get into government and begin to administer power the way they want.
Barrister Nwachukwu, so it's funny that you should actually say what you just said. The series of things that you've just said was actually something I was leading up to with my next question. But if I hear you correctly, you just said that the APC had the right formula. The APC put a structure in place to help it unseat any sitting power at the moment. But now it's gone rogue, if I get you correctly. Now, the ADC has that potential as well. And that's where my next question is coming from now. Are we seeing Nigeria shift to a situation where coalition politics becomes the rule of the day, like what we have in other developed countries. In America, for instance, people come together, still hold their party ideals, but they come together, and even after that, they still remain. But in Nigeria, and with the ADC now, even if they do have such a good structure, after 2027, do you see the ADC still holding true to what it started out being, different individuals who want to come together to for the good of Nigeria, or do you see it disbanding because of the different ideologies that have come into the mix?
Well, first of all, the ADC as constituted today is a coming together, a fusion of what I could call interest individuals and groups who want to get into power. If for any reason the ADC does not oust Tinubu from power, or does not oust the ADC from power, I foresee that after post-2027, new political alignments are going to emerge. You know, in the APC today, things are looking a bit calm because there's an incumbent who wants to run for a second term. Usually when it's that way, and there are no internal insurrections, like we don't have any major insurrections internally in the APC today, publicly, like we had in the PDP pre-2015. Usually it looks like everybody is together. But once that season passes, and even if the incumbent wins, there will begin a bitter power struggle to replace him will begin. And in the ADC, normally when you lose elections, bad blood begins to run. So many inquisitions start coming up. So many questions are asked. And in the process, some people may feel that they were shortchanged, or certain persons shouldn't have taken certain positions. So I foresee another realignment of forces that will properly become an opposition for 2031. That is when probably a bigger, stronger opposition platform may emerge from those who will feel that in the post-Tinubu era, they're not likely to be favored. And those who believe that, oh, we need this thing now, we've lost it in 2027, and they want to correct certain things they think didn't go well. That was part of the idea behind the success of the APC in 2015. So I see the ADC dissipate. I see it's nothing holds them ideologically. What holds them is that they want to remove Tinubu from power. The moment they're not able to remove Tinubu from power, that adventure just ends there. And most of them will move away and begin to look for other means to further their political interests. That's how I see it.
Well, so, Barrister, I think the next question now will be, what arrangement does ADC have to, come up with? You already mentioned that it feels like ADC is on, standing on one leg. And, who is now going to be the leadership? Is it going to be Peter Obi, or is it going to be somebody else? What's your take on that?
Well, the truth of the matter is that if there is a primary contest in the ADC today, the way I've been an organizing secretary of the party, as organizing secretary of the party, the organizing secretary of the party is in charge, is the person who implements decisions of the party hierarchy in terms of the holding of congresses and primaries. So with my little experience of the way primaries, political primaries and congresses are held, if the ADC holds a primary election for the presidential ticket for 2027, holds today or tomorrow, or even next tomorrow, Atiku Abubakar will pick the tickets. That is the truth of the matter. Because his political machinery controls most of the state party apparatus of the ADC. And that is where the delegates of the primaries are going to be selected from. The national delegates are selected from in the PDP, it used to be one per local government. So you have 774 of them plus the statutory national delegates. So anybody who controls a large chunk of the structure of the party, at the party levels, will emerge victorious. The Peter Obi's movement, which is the obedient movement, they have just come into the party. There is already a structure in place in the ADC. Unless the ADC enters into congresses where they dismantle what is there now and opens up the space at the state level and at the local government level to now bring in P2B's people and other interests. But if the ADC remains the way it is constituted at the state level, as at today, Atiku Abubakar is already the candidate of the party, except a consensus arrangement where the leaders come together and decide that maybe let's give it to some other person. But if there's a primary, which is the conventional thing to do, Atiku has an advantage over Peter.
Barrister Nwachukwu, I want to say thank you very much. You've actually opened our eyes to some very interesting new intakes here when it comes to the situation with the ADC especially, and the cross-carpeting that's been happening and realignments across parties. It's obvious to see that when it comes to 2027, it's not just about the ballots or the numbers, it's also about why people are moving to these different parties and what the voters or electorate have to do. They have to identify themselves and know exactly why they're voting for these different candidates. Barrister Gozie Nwachukwu, once again, thank you very much. We wait to see what's going to happen, especially when it comes to the leadership of the APC, because that seems to be the one question everybody is waiting for before they make up their minds about the ADC as well.
Thank you so much, sir.
Mm-hmm.